Hello and welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Comstock. Back in May, health data company Datavant announced its plans to acquire Aetion, creating a formidable player in the real-world data space. Now that the acquisition is closed, I've asked Arnaub Chatterjee, President and General Manager of Life Sciences at Datavant, to join me in discussing what the integration will look like and what the implications are for the pharma industry. Welcome to the show, Arnaub, and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So, I always like to start, just in case there's folks who aren't familiar. Give me the elevator pitch on Datavant and what you do.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start. And, effectively, we're a protector, a connector, and a deliverer of data. And we're a business that, has a number of different intersections with the broader healthcare system, inclusive of our payer, provider, life sciences, and other types of requesters that we service as part of our core business. But Datavant effectively is sort of a steward and connector of health data across a number of different parties within the healthcare ecosystem.
So, talk to me a little bit about the history of this acquisition. How did it come together? What was your relationship with Aetion before, and when did sort of folks decide that it made sense to combine these businesses?
Yeah, it's a funny kind of full circle moment in some ways. Having kind of sat in real world data, real world evidence now for most of my career, I've had a chance to watch Aetion kind of help lead the space for the better part of 10 years, and in some ways kind of help pioneer the way that we think about fit for purpose data and terms that we've been using, I guess, a little bit over time now in terms of how we think about the applications of real world data. So, when I joined about a year ago into Datavant, a big kind of thesis that we were anchoring on was, how do we take the footprint that Datavant has, which is really kind of meant to be, again, sort of a connector and linker, really kind of driving the health data ecosystem. And then what do we do to kind of increase our presence, the value that we provide back to a whole range of different customer bases that we serve? And when we kind of shortlisted the number of companies in the space that were scaled, that had real credibility and respect around how they think about the applications of data, we landed on Aetion. So we've been engaging in conversations, and kind of thinking about, does the fit make strategic sense? How do we think about, what's sort of the bigger picture that we're trying to get to? And I think the vision on building, an end to end evidence generation platform, end to end meaning how do we, help a life sciences, go from molecule to market basically. But what is sort of the vision behind product and technology and real expertise, on the people side to help make that a reality. And ATM became kind of a no brainer for us in terms of, a way to kind of marry what we have and what they have.
Yeah. So talk to me about what you have and what they have. I mean, unless you're just acquiring a competitor to get them out of the way, usually a deal like this is something you bring to the table, something they bring to the table, and hopefully 2 plus 2 is more than four. But spin some of those out for me.
Yeah. So Datavant, in our life sciences business today is basically the largest network for compliant and patient level data linkage. So we work with over 350 different companies right now, and that's comprised of life sciences, real world data providers. We work with large government agencies like the NIH, but all of those entities are effectively linking data through Datavant's token. And a big, area of how we can expand on that linkage was really, what do we do to improve visibility to data sets across that entire ecosystem? How do we help, I guess, the broader set of end users understand what are new use cases, and how do you really get good feedback on what's a good data set or what can you do to improve that data set? And I think the big industry problem that we're trying to frankly solve for is, this fact that there's been a pretty massive amount of real world data liquidity that's taken place, which is good. But then in parallel, this data has been siloed and fragmented, and the tools to get to most of this data are pretty hard to scale. So that's sort of the industry problem that we're trying to tackle. And in parallel, I think for life science organizations in general, there's like a pretty substantial, growing pressure to generate better insights from this huge surge in data liquidity, right? So for folks who've lived in this real world evidence space now for 10, 15 years, we still have this onerous issue of like, getting access to data, improving time to insight, better visibility into data that you're trying to procure. Cost of data keeps going up. So, like, how do you kind of figure out a way to fix that major hurdle and then kind of move the drug faster along in its development life cycle? And what Aetion really brings, I think, is solving for a few of those pretty big issues. One being that they've built products that really get to whether a data set is meant to solve for a certain use case or what we call fit for purpose. Aetion has 80 different data partners that they work with. And, they've been sort of a data agnostic player, really trying to help people understand like what's a good data set and how do we think about that data set through whatever use case it's trying to solve for. The second thing is like, there's a whole suite of privacy tools and enhancements that really speed up data turnarounds while being, compliant with how we think about the HIPAA DID process. And the last thing is, expertise. They're bringing 70 of the world's best epidemiologists and outcomes researchers who can make a ton of sense out of linked data. And can that data be used for a label expansion or inform a regulatory decision or feed into an internal decision, right, for an end customer, so or end pharma user? And that's really the so what. We think the combination of those things that they have and the root problem that we're trying to solve for come together really nicely.
Got it. And so, what will that actually look like now that the deal is closed? What are the first steps and next steps? And
Yeah, great question. So the idea around, it's probably a two-part story here. One is, can we really build that unified platform? And that platform spans, kind of on one side what Datavant does best and has for some time, which is like data discovery and linkage and privacy. And then the other piece of it is, once that takes place, can you then curate and clean up this data and then make it analytics ready, right? And that's sort of the vision of how do you use a data platform that enables real visibility into all of these 350 plus data partners, so that you can really make good assessments and rigorous assessments on who's the right data partner. And that should apply to the clinical side of a business or the commercial side or the safety side. And that's why we want to think about the platform a little bit more holistically. And that's really one of the big end goals. If you had to ask me, a year from now, like what does success look like? I think it would be sort of an industry adoption of this platform that we built together. Um, I think the second, you know, thing that would be really impactful is, you know, if we really make strong investments in linking data in the trial to the real world now, as a trial starts or as you get into a phase two or phase three, once you link that data, we want to bring to life whether it really informs critical decisions, like can you design a sharper protocol, or can you actually expand a label, or can you actually build an external control with linked data, because linked data fills in a lot of the gaps that are traditionally found in non-clinical trial data sets. And the idea is you have the whole individual wrapped up in a linked data set. Can you then shorten the time it takes to get a drug to market, or can you really inform like a post-marketing safety study in a more rigorous way, and really save time or get back to a regulator in a way that's meaningful. So I want to change the entire development life cycle, I think, in some ways. And this is why it's not meant to be like you're asking me what success looks like. I don't think we want to get into the game of incrementalism here. Like we're trying to change the entire data collection process, and what we're people talk about holistic data generation. That's what this is.
yeah, so this is a big business right now, right? I mean, pretty much table stakes. If you're a big pharma or a small biotech, you need to be using real world data. You need to be using it smartly. You need to be, hopefully using it a little bit better than the other guy. But what's the competitive landscape look like, especially post this acquisition?
Yeah, I think that this has always been pretty rooted in the ethos for both Datavant and Aetion, but at its core, that data ecosystem is a bit of a rising tide, all boats situation. And what that means is, we are trying to help create visibility into all of this valuable data. And we do think that, you know, any one of these data sets could provide a critical unlock for either another end data partner or for life sciences. So, in many ways, like we're not really in the business here of competing against our ecosystem, but we're really trying to focus on exposure and visibility to any one of our 300 data partners. And then that part's really critical is like we have to ensure that we maintain a healthy data ecosystem, because I think we keep seeing new and new companies come to life, and the range of data modalities keeps expanding. So we see new omics companies and imaging and unstructured data companies coming out every day. And how do we ensure that we're fostering kind of the ability to find those data sets and see what problem that they can solve for? So I think that's probably, kind of core to our mission in terms of how we perceive competition. It's that we're actually trying to probably service a bigger cause here. I think, moving forward, we're hoping that this platform actually solves for a lot of key issues that affects, both the data ecosystem as well as life sciences, right? And if we can kind of be like a central command for all data transactions, taking place, whether it's on the ecosystem side or on the life sciences side, that's where we're trying to solve for. So it was a big part of our thesis kind of going into, what type of company makes sense for us to partner with at Datavant, that we maintain sort of the guardrails around like how we're preserving that ecosystem. And then if there's ways for us to build product and services to enhance linked data sets, like I think that's probably better for the entire industry.
Yeah, so it's not just the quality of the data, or even the quality of the analysis of the data. It's sort of like what, as you say, what product are you providing? What service are you providing? Like what problem are you solving for your customers?
Yeah, I think that's right. And there's so many types of questions that we find, our customers coming back to us and asking, is there a data set that fulfills this? And how do I know? And, I do think that we spin ourselves around in circles as an entire industry, trying just to get a better hold on data being sufficient to answer a question. And that in turn impacts whether you can submit evidence of a certain class or grade or quality back to whoever the end party is, whether that's a high level regulator or whether it's even internally, like whether you should move forward on a trial decision or not. Right. And I think that's the biggest, kind of challenge is we have so many more options now of what data is out there, but in parallel, we are not demystifying that process, right? And if anything, in parallel, we're also like saying data's gotten more expensive, right? So if we can resolve that key bottleneck while turning around privacy around data sets fast, while also making the data clean and usable, that should, in theory, be a huge savings in cost and efficiency and time, which is the biggest thing we're trying to solve for.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, you're serving a lot of masters, right? Because your data set has to be, secure and private for the patients. But it also, there has to be a certain amount of transparency so that the regulators will be like, What is this data? Where did it come from? Why should
Right.
I trust it?" So, how do you balance kind of, yeah, having a transparent process with having a process that's sort of opaque in the right ways, and then throw, I guess you said, you know, you don't really think of it as competitive, but throw kind of proprietary stuff in there too.
Yeah. So if I just understand your question, Joan, I guess what you're asking is like, how do we serve all the masters?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's the delicate, balance or tightrope that we walk. But I do think like we've seen more and more of our ecosystem kind of go on sort of multi-year partnerships and relationships and rides with us now, even after the announcement with Aetion, and some of them are even more committed to us, to take part in the next, 3 or 5 years with us, which is really exciting to see. So, I think that's one thing for us, which is very important, which is how do we look at the preservation of different types of data in the ecosystem, the companies that comprise it, the working relationships we have with them, and like, in terms of servicing those organizations, are we making that discovery and privacy and linkage effort better? That's sort of, core principle one. I think on, core principle two, with like how we work with the broader life sciences industry, we're finding more and more life science companies are asking Datavant, and now Aetion to kind of help with the linkage of their own internal data sets, right? And their own data visibility. And that's a problem that we hadn't thought about probably a year ago, but now that we're seeing it under a magnifying glass, like servicing those types of organizations means giving them more access and visibility into a platform that can help them find data more efficiently, right? And that's a different type of use case, but almost gets you closer to sort of this ideal feedback loop, right? Where you want the ecosystem partners to work directly with life sciences, right? That's their end customer base too, right? So we're kind of that transaction layer, and visibility layer. And if we can get that right, then we kind of have like a really good feedback loop here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, I mean, is part of the increased demand for kind of robust and linked data sets, is that related to AI? Everyone's trying to get the most value out of AI algorithms, machine learning, and it's only as good as the data that underpins it.
Yeah, I think that's right, right? And the idea here is that we have built these data sets, through linked data that are robust and longitudinal and kind of comprise different healthcare interactions. Meaning, I can find a tokenized, de-identified data set for Jonah, and that will consist of a claims data set, from Jonah's interaction with a payer, or insurance company, and then your interaction with, a certain medical system, as well as maybe a diagnostic or test you received at a lab company, right? And could also include, your genomic profile. And to have that available, is sort of the holy grail, right? Where you have the ability to have that concentration of data and on an individual patient. And then the AI fun begins, right? So from our perspective, we think a lot about, yes, we're kind of like the bedrock for, this rich data set to inform all sorts of AI driven decisions. The things that we're working on our end on AI is really, one kind of like, how do we think about conversational interfaces that allow you to interrogate the different data sets that are in our world? The second is AI for privacy assessments. We do several hundred, expert determinations on privacy every year that AI should be able to, find better ways to help speed up. And then three, we work a lot on, with partners in clinical data abstraction as well, like on unstructured data. We do a lot of unstructured data privacy work as well. So, our intersections with AI are to improve kind of that core end product I was talking about. But then in parallel, we're seeing life science companies and ecosystem partners and even the government have a ton of different use cases for how they're looking at linked data for AI.
So taking a step back, I mean, you already kind of took a told me a little bit about kind of how you see it shaping up in the future, but not just Datavant and Aetion, but this whole industry. What are kind of the next frontiers? One thing, for instance, like you talked about that data set. Of course, there are always gaps, right? Like where something doesn't get captured in the claim data or the EHR data because I went to an online telehealth provider because I couldn't get GLP-1s any other way or something. Like so maybe it's about kind of filling those gaps in and getting that whole picture. But what are some of the things that you think like the next nut to crack or the next challenge to get through in order to kind of keep making this product as useful as it can be?
Yeah, I think, and that's really where you have to start to push on like what are the real end goals for how I think real world evidence can actually start to show value in different ways, right? And value can be in different parts of the clinical, I guess, the drug development life cycle, but can you show that a linked data set was critical for an early regulatory approval, or that you drove or accelerated a conditional approval? And same thing, I guess, in market access or in commercial. Like, can on the commercial side, can you show how you drove continued uptake in a crowded marketplace? Can you show on the market access side that you were able to, develop a comparator to show differentiation? Right? There are these big pivotal areas, and I think the framework for how we think about return on investment on real world data is what we have to prove out, right? That's what would really change sort of the next step in how our industry perceives the applications of real world data. Because I think in theory, everyone has always said like it makes a ton of sense for people to use non clinical trial data to contextualize a patient, right? But what we're now getting to is that's great. But in order for the drug development side or clinical development or even earlier parts of discovery in pharma to really feel the impact of data, they have to really see that it's influencing a reduction in cost or time, or a reduction in time to launch, or an improvement in time from study approval to some kind of valuable insight that came out of a study design. If the whole notion, and people have heard me kind of go on this talk track for a while now, but it's like the how do you improve the probability of success of a launch, or downstream, how do you show a drug was truly safe, efficacious, or commercializable because real world evidence changed some needle there, right? And I think that's going to be the pivot point in our industry. I do think that the linked data world here is a really critical enabler for that. And part of the reason of us, pursuing Aetion was because we needed folks who sat in the room with regulators and with payers and with, HTAs, and really understood like, how do we get better information to those organizations, right? And I think this is where we really want to see, Aetion's, decades of expertise start to inform like what kind of new narrative we can create for linked data sets.
Great. Yeah, I mean that's I think a good segue to the other question I want to ask, which is if I'm a pharma executive or or even a like a researcher, but if I'm working in life sciences, what do I need to know about this deal and what it means, and what why should I be excited about it, and why might I want to like reach out if I haven't reached out to Datavant before?
Yeah. I think like the key things here is, are really that one, our customers have been asking us now, show me an actual end-to-end platform that can, help me assess and validate and better interrogate the data sets that are on the Datavant platform, right? That's sort of the first core question that comes up a lot. And I think the second thing is, can you then bring together like how the rest of this will look? Can you give me an infrastructure that creates visibility? It lessens data movement and data friction, and kind of gets to a whole new range of data sets that can improve our use cases. So we are trying to change the entire conversation on data quality, speed to insight, data discovery, privacy, and that's been kind of the biggest pushes that companies have asked for. And then I think in parallel, like the thing that I think life science companies have been asking for the most is um, not kind of one-off point solutions, but like a scaled platform that has kind of the full ecosystem at its disposal. And then are there tools and kind of features that sit in various different parts of drug development that we can leverage so that we can see the entire end-to-end kind of holistic picture of a trial, right? And can we then link data sets? Can we understand the utility of that data? Can we inform sort of decisions that are critical at each point in a trial to get to a way to define what's faster and better? So that's really what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build. So again, we're not trying to build an incremental solution here. I think the idea is building sort of a bridge between disconnected data, and then what are the analytics that sits across all of those functions responsible for getting a drug to market, and how does that build work faster and kind of unlocks new value.
There's so many there's so many use cases we use real world data for, and I'm sure that it's increasing all the time. But there's also I think a discourse around kind of um, the truly transformative. Will we ever reach a day where we're using real world data in place of sort of costly trials, right? Or increasingly, does real world data start to cut into the need for randomized control trials. Do you have any thoughts about that kind of big question? Do you guys spend any time thinking about that kind of thing?
Yeah, a lot actually. And this is why we put so much emphasis on companies linking their trial to real world data, right? Because I think that the RCT has always been sort of a gold standard for very controlled settings, right? And that allows you to collect data with a specific rigor. But what we're suggesting now is because of Datavant's access and because of Aetion's scientific services, we can make a lot more sense out of non-clinical trial data, right? So I think we do think about a world here where if you have the necessary attributes, and you really, really, really have to get fit for purpose right here, and this is why Aetion's been so critical for our thinking, but the attributes that go behind this, which is actual clinical depth, the cohort size, the representativeness of the patient population, longitudinality, those have to support the specific research question or the regulatory goal, right? And I think we've known this for a while. Regulators have told us what are the gaps in real world data. We have assessed that on our end, kind of through and through, and said that here is where linked data sets can actually fill in those gaps. Here is where the regulatory expertise of an Aetion can actually explain whether that data set will be truly helpful, or you can evaluate the utility of that data set. And everyone kind of speaks of like, what is decision grade evidence? That's the thing that we think about the most, right? Is like, how do we push that within our industry? So
Um, I'll throw you this one, and if it's too hot a potato, you can throw it back. But obviously, ton of big changes at the FDA lately, and I think a lot of kind of mindset changes, I guess. Have you heard so far anything about how this new administration is thinking about real world evidence and what they're going to accept? Do they seem kind of open to revisiting, some of the ways that, that the kinds of data from drug trials that they're going to consider to be proof worthy?
So, we work really closely with, the government, and have for a while. We've renewed some really important relationships that we've had for many, many years now with organizations like the NIH, and we have a very close relationship with the FDA. Our perspective here is, we're going to continue to kind of serve the broader needs of, different constituents here. Again, kind of, playing with all masters at the table. At the same time, I think, there's refresh perspectives. I think we're excited to work closely with the administration. We're already kind of closely involved in a number of different discussions to support how linked data tokenization can work. And, we have had longstanding relationships in building precision medicine assets, for example. Datavant is the kind of the data layer behind the National COVID Collaborative, the All of Us initiative. We do a lot of work with, large provider registries that are critical for government. So, our perspective is going to be to continue to, provide that infrastructure and kind of the work that we've been doing, and, continue to work closely with the administration in this way.
What haven't I asked you about yet, Arnaud, that you think is important or interesting?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I think, as we think about, what's sort of the next step evolution here, like, how do we develop a way to, kind of think about other technology partners in this world to answer complex questions or to enable this. And it's probably worth us kind of highlighting our relationship with big tech partners and kind of where they fit in all this. So happy to weigh in on our relationships with AWS and Databricks and Snowflake. But we do think that these organizations have kind of a critical role in how we think about data and technology kind of fostering this world for us.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me. This is really interesting, and it's always nice when we're able to kind of respond quickly to something in the news, and get that extra perspective on a story like this. So I really appreciate you taking the time, Arnab, and good luck as you kind of bring these two organizations together.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for making the time for us.
That concludes another episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about previous installments, at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Podbean, and pretty much wherever else you download your podcasts. Just search for pharmaphorum and follow and hit subscribe. Of course, don't forget to visit the website itself, where you can sign up for daily and weekly news and analysis bulletins, and follow us on Blue Sky and LinkedIn at pharmaphorum. That's PharmaPhorum. That's all for now. Thanks for listening.